started. I want to keep the same structure that the Pastor Sebas has. So if you guys have any prayer requests before we start, before we pray, that'd be good. Yeah, her recovery. And definitely like a praise, right? That mom and baby are healthy. Yeah. I showed my mom the picture and she was like, Ariel has the same nose as Benny. So that was so cute. Like seeing like, I don't know, both of them merged together into, a small human being. But yeah. And he's like, is he chill? I asked her this morning how her first night went, and she said the nurses were helping a lot. So, like, the first night is always... I asked Melanie, too, like, the first night. Like, this is, like, the first night where, like, you can't just, like, sleep and, like, not have anyone to worry about, I don't know. So, but that's good. Anyone else? Anything good that we can thank God for? No. Edgar, your new job. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's going good.
What are your hours looking like?
I don't get paid by the hour. I get paid by production.
But I mean, like your schedule. What does your schedule look like?
Monday through Friday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What, like 8 to...
6:30. We get it on like 2 o'clock.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Early mornings means that, yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty chill.
You have like the day to... Hey, Becky. You have the day to like do
Sometimes
whatever,
we get
yeah.
off at 12 sometimes. It just depends how fast we work,
Because if it's by production and you get done earlier,
Yeah.
and you get to leave earlier, yeah. You have to work harder too. You can't just like slack off one day, and not, yeah. Yeah, there's pros and cons, yeah. That's good, yeah. I don't have anything either. I don't think I've ever asked for like prayer for this, but I do, like at my school, we have a good news club, where it's like a church, and they come every Tuesday and they talk to, I have a really small school, and so it's an after school program. So like whatever parents want to sign up their kids, they can come, and so this is the end of the first semester, and we'll have it next semester too. But it's been going really well, and so I think that's also a praise that we got to finish the semester. This is the only time that legally we can talk to them about God, and so it's really good. It's been really good. And so I'm glad that, even though it's not like a church that I agree with 100%, it's still talking about the gospel and, God's love. And so that's really good for them to hear. So yeah, if there's not anything else, I can go ahead and start praying. Okay. Abacadosh, thank you for this day. Thank you for letting us wake up and get here safely from our houses, that you have let us get through this whole week of work, of school, with friends, family, and letting us be here today. I pray that you help us to understand what it is that you want in our lives, that every day that we live is to worship you and to show others of your love. I pray that you help us this day to stay focused in what we need to, and that we can also apply what we're learning and have it marked in our minds and in our souls, to praise you and to give you the honor and the glory. We pray for Christy. We give you so much thanks that you have let her get through this first pregnancy with everything going well, and that finally she has baby Ariel to hold in her arms, and for Benny as well, that you give them as new parents strength to raise this child in your standards and your love, and that everything is to worship you. I pray for the students at my school, that you touch their hearts in this last session of hearing your word, and that you touch their hearts and change them to be more like you, and to understand who you are. Help us in this time that we have to understand everything. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Let's get started. I had a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, but I remember that last time, sometimes the Estudio Biblico is not as long when the pastores aren't here, so I was like, gotta take it down a little bit. So I put a couple of notes, bullet points here, but mostly it's just gonna be me talking. So yeah. So who knows the name of the Parashat from last week? It's similar to the one this week, but it's a little different. Vayishlaj was last week, and this week, Vayishlaj. Yeah, good job. You guys should know too. Oh, you guys weren't here last week with me. Did you guys finish recording the video? You guys, yeah? Okay. Well, I'll give you guys a break. Vayishlaj, right? And that covers Genesis 32 to 36, right? And I put this line up here where kind of the title should go, because whenever I take notes, like for a class or whatever, right? I don't like to put a title for it. I like to wait until the end, and kind of like the main idea of what I understood is set as a topic, right? And so at the end, I want you to set a title for the class of what you learned, right? And what you got from it. So Vayishlaj means and he sent, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. And what my main topic for this, what I wanted it to be, is about words. You're like, well, words, like the whole Bible has words, right? Like we need to be a little bit more specific, right? And so with words, I wanted to specifically be about Jacob, right? Yaakov's words, which we know that he is mentioned a lot in Genesis, right? He has about 25 chapters that are dedicated just to this man, right? He's named after Israel, right? The Israelitas, everything, right? It starts with him, right? His parents, Abraham, Isaac, right, are patriarchs, right? And so he must have been a great person, right? He must have been this powerful man that had, a lot of things going for him and everything, right? But the main trend that we see of him is deceit, right? Lies, trickery, right? And mainly it's about how he tricked his father, right? For the birthright, for the promise. He tricked his brother, right? Even before he's born, right? First set of twins that we hear talk about, right? Jacob and Esau. These twins, how they're fighting, right? In the mom's womb, right? And so they're born, and that's kind of like a foreshadowing of literally his whole life, is this arguing, this back and forth, right? With his brother specifically. And I'm sure that you guys can relate to this one way or another, right? I'm sure not physically, right, arguing with brother or sister, but definitely with your words, right? Things that you say. And it's crazy because your brothers, your sisters, your mom, your dad, they know how to push your buttons, right? Even if, they don't mean to, or if they do mean to, like, they know you more than anyone. They know you more than your friends. They know you more than your teachers at school. They know you. And if you want to hurt your brother or sister, like, you know how. You know how to embarrass them. You know everything about them, right? And so we see here how Jacob is so deceitful, right? Jacob. It has a synonym of Israel, right, later on. And how his words caused so much disagreement in the Parashat that you guys said, Vayishlaj, last week, right? We see where he was running away from his brother. He went to this land in the wilderness called Bethel, right? Well, it wasn't called that, but he had a dream of what? Last week's Parashat. He got a rock to put his head on, and he had a dream about angels and a stair, right? A staircase that was descending, angels. Angels were descending, right? He woke up and he said, surely God is here, right? And I didn't know it. And later on, if you guys heard, I got the last bit of it because I was in the kids' class, but the pastor was talking about this, how he did know that God was there, right? But he just hadn't realized it. Anyways, he makes his altar, he calls it Bethel, the house of God, right? And we see here this man that is so, so great, that God reveals to him. And in that dream, he gives him that promise again, right? That he gave Abraham, that he gave Isaac. I'm going to make your descendants, your children, as the number of the stars, as the sand in the earth, right? I'm going to give you these descendants. I'm going to give you children, right? And so here we're focusing on, and he sent, right? And words. We see later on how Jacob was deceitful to his father, right? And when I was looking at this, I was reading like some commentaries on it. And I feel like my brain is always very black and white. Like, he lied, man. Like, he lied to his father. Like, it's not like, oh, like, he thought this was the right thing to do. I'm like, no, he lied. Like, he didn't trick him. He didn't like this. He lied. He straight up lied to him. He said, I'm Esau. Like, I am my brother Esau. Bless me, right? And when I was reading these commentaries, I was like, well, okay. Jacob probably thought that he was doing the right thing, right? There's a verse, and I didn't write it down, but we can look it up, how it says that Isaac, right? Isaac had his favorite son that was Esau. And Raquel, her favorite son was Jacob, right? And so in this we can see what Jacob probably thought. He said, my dad is blinded by the love that he has for Esau. He doesn't know that I am stronger than him. I'm smarter than him. I'm smarter than my brother. I should have the birthright. Like, yes. And sometimes we see that, right? We judge our parents for what they do, and we're like, no, like, you see my brother, and you're not seeing everything, you know? And this is probably what he thought. In his mind, he probably thought that he was doing the right thing in tricking his father for the birthright, right? And he probably was right. He probably was, at some point, probably was smarter than Esau, than his brother, right? Maybe he was. But is that an excuse, right? There's a quote that says, does the end justify the means, right? Am I going to do this to get the result in the end, right? Maybe Adonai was working something. Maybe Jacob was going to get it at some point. He wasn't patient. He didn't pray to God, right? And later on, we are going to see how he did pray to God later on. Damage is already done, right? And so with this trickery, he is running away from his brother. He goes to see a man, right? He meets this man, Laban, right? And this is from the last week, right? He works 20 years, right? 20 years for the woman that he loves, for Rachel, right? Works 7 years, marries Leah. He got tricked, right? Another 7 years for everything that he had. He goes, right? He leaves. He leaves, and he leaves Laban. And Laban is coming running. Why did you leave in the middle of the night? Why did you leave with my wife and my things and everything I had? You left. And Jacob was like, Laban, I thought that you weren't going to let me go. I thought that you were going to let your daughters go, right? Laban's like, okay, why did you take my idols? Jacob's like, wait, I didn't take your idols, right? Whoever takes your idols, whoever took your idols is to be put to death, right? And who was the one that took the idols? Rachel, the woman that he loved, right? What had Jacob said? The person that took the idols was to be put to death. And we see, again, words. We see Jacob's words and how they are affecting him. Sometimes we do things, right? And we think that they're not affecting anyone, right? We think that what we are doing is victimless, right? Have you heard of that? Like victimless crimes, right? Victimless sins, right? Things that we do that I'm like, I'm not going out like robbing something. I'm not affecting anyone. I'm not going out and killing someone. I'm not affecting anyone. But we know from what we've learned is that everything that we have has a consequence, right? We know now we're children of God. God forgives us. But we have consequences for things, right? We have consequences for things. And when I was looking at this, I was thinking about children, right? How we should be like children. And I was like, okay, well, what are children like? Some of you guys may be around children a lot. Some of you guys might not, right? Children are passionate. Children are loving, right? This week, I don't know what was going on. I don't know if it was the week after Thanksgiving that affected these kids. I don't know. A lot of people say like the full moon. Have you guys heard of that? I don't know if I believe that, full moon, right? I think it was Wednesday that it was like the full moon. And I was driving back from work and it was like 5, it's already dark by then. And I saw the full moon and I was like, I don't know if that's true. Anyways, I can, with my class, scold them and I can be like, stop it. And I correct them with things and they get teary-eyed sometimes. They're sensitive, right? And I kid you not, I think 15 minutes, if not 20 minutes go by and they're already coming up to me. Not upset, not mad. They're like, I love you. come around and give me a hug. I'm like, really? I was just mad. We were just upset with you 20 minutes ago about this that you weren't doing, And that's how we should be, right? They are so passionate, so loving. That's how we should be, right? And so I was thinking too, they can't feed themselves. They can't dress themselves. Is that how we should be? We should be lazy, like other people do things for us? No. Just like children, they rely on who? On their parents to take care of them, on their teachers to teach them, right? On people to take care of them. How should we be like that, right? We should ourselves depend on God, right? When we wake up, not planning, not making a plan without consulting God, right? And I've gotten way better at this because I would wake up and I would get on social media or I would get on my email, right? And figure out what I'm going to do for the day without consulting God first, right? And even though it's a quick prayer that you're doing, God, thank you for letting me wake up. It's the beginning of a new day. Giving the day to Him, however it is, right? However it is that you do, right? And I read my Bible in the afternoon because in the morning I don't wake up early enough, right? But even if it's just with a prayer, right? That we don't get dressed without consulting God. That we don't make plans for the week without consulting God. Like children, they rely on someone else, just like us. The Bible does talk about self-control, self-discipline, right? But in the sense of depending on God for the things that we do, right? And so in Matthew 18:3-4, it says, unless you change and become like little children, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's the second one, right? How we should be like children. I don't know if you guys, I brought this today and I was reading through it. This is the Sefer in English. Not, what do you call it? Not sponsored or anything, right? But I got it and I was reading it just this week. I'd gotten it for 3 weeks. It was $70, I think. The pastores made it. They translated it into English. Way easier. I don't think if it was just in Spanish, I would have gotten it. And it's kind of like a commentary of the whole these verses, because sometimes these chapters are a little bit hard to read, right? And there was one that really caught my eye. Excuse me. And it talked about Esau's kiss, right? Jacob is running away from Laban, right? And he knows that he is getting to the place where Esau was. Remember the brother that he stole the birthright from, that he stole the promise from? Esau was living where Jacob was going to go, right? How do you think he was feeling? If you know that you wronged someone and you're heading that way, right? Probably a little bit scared, right? So what does he do? He goes and he sends his messengers and he's like, let's go see what the situation's like, right? Let's go see what Esau's doing. Long story short, Esau is coming with about 400 men. And Jacob's like, what? 400 men. What am I going to do? 400, he thought they're going to come kill me, right? They're going to come kill me, literally. And so what does he do? He takes Leah, he takes Rachel, and he divides it, right? Because remember, he had that promise of his descendants. He had kids already. He had his kids, he had his cattle, he had all this stuff, right? He was a rich man, right? When he had worked for 20 years. And he separates them. He said, okay, this is the game plan, right? We're going to separate them. We're going to go see what he wants. If Esau comes to this camp, the other camp's going to go running, right? And so this is kind of what he was thinking. And he makes a prayer, right? He prays to God. And he's like, God, remembering that you told me to come to this land, to come with my family, to come with my cattle, to come with everything I had, and to go to this land that we're going to, right? What happens? God is telling him to do something. Is he going to send him there to just die? No, right? He's clinging on to the promise that Adonai had said that his descendants were going to be as many as the stars and as many as the sand, right? Infinite amount, right? God's not going to let my children be killed. God's not going to let me be killed, right? He had faith. And so in this prayer, he says, God, you told me, right? You told me to come to this land, but there's a war. They're coming to kill me, right? And so we see here that doesn't happen, right? And there's this kiss, right, that Esau gives Jacob. And because of the wording of the word kiss in Hebrew in this part of the chapter, it's understood, again, different schools of thought, that maybe it wasn't like a genuine kiss, right? Judas kiss. It wasn't very genuine. But when I was thinking about it, there has to be a certain amount of faith, that happens, right? We have to have a certain amount of faith in things that are happening, understanding the culture, but also a faith in the things that aren't said in the Bible so that we can understand them, right? Probably it's been a while since you've kissed your brother or sister, right? But you love them, right? They might take something from you. You might get into an argument, but you still love them, right? You still love them. And you might not kiss them, but you might hug them. You might ask them how they're doing, right? You love them. They're your family. They're your blood, right? And so here we have to believe that even though, and it's like something about like the dots that are on the words, right? That makes it seem disingenuous. We have to believe that that was real. We have to believe that Esau actually forgave his brother, right? Because that's love. That's what we're talking about. The whole Bible is about God's love for us, right? And so we see here that he has this kiss, right? And he forgives him. He forgives him for it, right? And so we see here that even though these twins were fighting at birth, they're still family at the end of the day, right? We should be like children. I know people that haven't talked to their mother, to their father, to their brother or sister for 20 years over something that they don't even remember. And I'm sure you do too, right? I don't talk to my sister. Why don't you talk to your sister? I don't even remember. We had an argument and, pride, man. Pride. You're really going to go 20 years. You don't know when your last day is going to be. You're really going to go 20 years without talking to your family for something that you don't even remember? Right? And I'm not judging because that's happened before. It's and we don't know, but there's that forgiveness and there's that love, right? And so we have to believe that this was something genuine, right? And so Jacob has a prayer and he says, God, I know that Esau is coming. I know that he's coming with so many soldiers, and he's coming and he's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me. But you promised me that you were gonna get me out of this, right? And in that prayer, he talks about how he knows he doesn't deserve, God's love, right? And again, we're looking at this with the whole Bible already written out, right? We have the 5 books, we have the New Testament, we have everything. But this is like a movie playing. Like Jacob knew. He had faith, but he didn't know what was going to be the outcome, right? He had faith, but he didn't know the outcome. And so here he knows how unworthy he is of God's love, of God's protection, right? And we have to have that sort of position when we're praying, right? The Lord's Prayer, right? If you don't know how to pray, and that's going to be our class this afternoon, girls, is like how to pray, right? He prayed knowing that he knew he didn't deserve God's love, God's protection. But he said, God, you're using me and I want you to use me, right? And so the Bible teaches us how to pray in Matthew, the Lord's Prayer, right? I missed a little part that talked about Jacob wrestling with God, right? I don't know if you've seen, if you look up Jacob wrestling with God on Google, and there's so many pieces of artwork. I decided to not have any PowerPoint or anything, just go analog, just Bible and paper. But if you want to look it up, different art pieces of Jacob fighting with this angel, right, which we know is God. And it's so interesting to me because we know after that, right, they stop. What happens? This angel, or Adonai, he goes and he strikes Jacob where? His hip, right? Did you know that that's the strongest part of the body? Is the femur, the hip bone. They call it the hip bone that connects the hip and the knee. The strongest part of him, right? The strongest part physically of his body is striked, right? And it's so crazy to me because if God, which we know is all-knowing, all-powerful, how can he fight with a man? How can he fight with his creation, right? With just a snap of a finger, we could all be gone, right? And so this is so interesting to me how God is kind of fighting with this, or the angel of God is fighting with Jacob, right? And at the end, he strikes his hip bone. What happens? Your hip is shot. What do? You're limping. He has a reminder for every day, the rest of his life, that he fought with God, right? And he's limping, and he's, it shows a sign of weakness, right? But even here it says that he won, right? And before that, it says in verse 32, verse 24. It says, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And so I kind of circled that part that said left alone, because that's how the Bible tells us to pray, right? That we're not praying overly dramatic, that we're not praying so everyone can hear, right? We're praying in our room behind closed doors, right? We're praying, and no one knows our relationship but God. God only is the only one that knows our prayers, our requests, right? And so he was left alone. He left his family, he left everything, and he was left alone, and he wrestled, right? And then later on, he calls that place, again, another altar, Peniel, which means, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. And that's verse 30. Excuse me. So we see here that Jacob, he was a man, I believe, strong-hearted, right? We see that. Fighting with his brother before he was even born, right? A strong man, right? A very strong man, a strong-willed person. But even after all of his mistakes, right, he's changed. His name is changed to Israel. That shows that us as people can be changed, right? And it's cool in a way, or interesting to see how our personalities change from children to now adults, right? Children are not prideful at all. They're forgiving, and sometimes we're not like that, right? Sometimes we puff of our chest because we think we know everything. We think, and it wasn't that long ago that I was talking with my mom, and I was like, are we really gonna be doing the Torah every, the whole, is it never ending? I read this already, every week, I'm reading it. And obviously I know, and hopefully for you too, there's new things that are coming up, right? I'm starting to memorize things. I'm starting to look at the Parashat, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know what that is, right? But are we really going through over and over again, right? And it's cool. I'm sure you guys have heard mentioned how it's not a cyclical study that we're doing, right? Because in circles you're not going anywhere, right? You just in a circle, but it's a spiral, right? Hopefully spiraling up, not spiraling down, but a spiral. We are going in circles, but we're going towards somewhere. We're going up. We're learning, And so, what am I trying to say here with this, right? Is that even through everything, though Jacob was known, and there's some sayings of how Jacob means like deceitful and liar, and that goes very well with who he is, his character throughout the Bible. But later on, when he's changed to Israel, the name Israel could have a definition of straight to God, right? Instead of being crooked and doing things his way and doing what he wants and thinking he knows what he's doing, he has a pathway straight to God, which later leads us on to the Israelites, right? Which were made to have a path towards God, right? And so it's cool to see this, how even though we think that things that we do, right? If you look at chapter 34, and I'm not going to go into it, but it talks about Dinah, right? The only daughter of Isaac, right? And how, I don't know if you know the whole story, but she went out and she was with a man, and, a lot of stuff happened, right? Simeon and Levi, right? They go and they're mad, right? You can imagine the brothers mad, and they go and they do horrible things to this little town, right? We could say justified, so, right? We could say that it was justified, it hurt my sister, right? If Edgar, they did something to Victoria, he would probably go, right? And we could say justified, probably so, right? Justified. And maybe the court, in some way could say, oh, he did it out of anger. He was angry, it's justified, right? But there comes a certain amount of faith, right, in what we have. And Jacob, we see later on his prayer that he said, God, I know I'm not worthy. I know that, you've called, you have a calling for me, but I'm not worthy, right? And even then we see God working, right? That should be our position. That should be our heart, is knowing that we're not worthy. But even then, God chooses to, right? God chooses to protect us. God chooses to love us, right? So all this to say that even though we, I know a lot of people, people at the church, but you probably don't have a change of name, physical change of name, right? I know I'm probably always going to be I know I'm, right? But there needs to be a change, right? There needs to be a inwardly first, but outwardly change, right? Of how we're evolving, of how not only we're growing, but then also growing into children, into being dependent of God, right? And so it's really interesting how Jacob had a lot of fights. He had a lot of things happening, but it was because of what? because of his words, right? We've heard of Leshon Hara, right? Of the speaking that caused him to have so much pain, right? The premature death of Rachel, that he said, whoever took these idols, Lavan, I didn't do it, but whoever took these idols is to be put to death. We see in chapter 35, at the end of 35, the death of Rachel, right? Death of Rachel and Isaac because of what he said. And so when we think about this, right, when I was thinking about this, I was like, I want this to be more like something that's to your mind, right? Not something that's like makes you feel good and like, oh, okay, like this makes me feel good. Like, I'm going to go through the week, and I'm going to, watch what I'm saying. No, I want this to be something that doesn't hit your heart, but hits your mind, right? Because our mind is what needs to be renewed, right? Romans 12, 1 and 2. Our mind needs to be renewed, not our heart. The heart is deceitful. Whatever we feel doesn't really matter. It changes. Imagine how many feelings, if you were to have a little journal of your feelings, of how they change throughout the day, right? In the morning, you probably woke up on the wrong side of the bed, right? Mad. And then as the day goes on, okay, I got Dunkin'. It feels good, right? Happy. Like this happened at work. Oh, like, this person didn't do what he was supposed to. That. How our feelings fluctuate, how our heart fluctuates, right? But our mind, it should be what should bring us back to reality and to be like, okay, this is the facts, this is what's happening, right? And so when I always think of like this, talking about the Torah and the Parashat, but how can this be applied to your life? I want you to think about that. How can what we've learned about who he sent, how we're children, how Jacob turned to Israel, is that even though we don't have a physical change of name, right? Even though we don't go to our birth certificate and we change our name, there's a physical change in our heart, right? There's a physical change that happens. And we see that with Jacob. He was born as a man, as a person, right, that was known as deceitful. He deceived his family. And that affected them, right? He spoke wrong to the woman that he loved. Literally, it says the love of his life. And he caused her to prematurely die because of his words, right? Our words have power, right? There's power in the tongue and in what we say. And so with this, the thing that I got out of was watching what we say, right? Watching everything that we say. And there was like a study that I saw. It was a long time ago, and I didn't look back at it. But it saw, like, it compared how many words a man or a boy, whatever, speaks throughout the day compared to like what a woman speaks. Like, and it's like more than double. And like, I can't believe that. When I'm here, when I'm planning this, and like, when I'm at school or whatever, I can get lost in like what I'm saying, and like, oh, I just like to hear myself talk. But no, right? Like things that we say, if we had a transcript of what we said, like, would it be more good than bad? A lot of times we tell people, if you don't have anything good to say, like, don't say anything at all, right? Because there's power in our tongue, right? And we've learned that now, but like, there is things that people have declared that even though it's not like brujeria or anything, but it affects you, right? If you say this is going to happen and it ends up happening, like, we kind of like, I don't want to say like spoken into existence, because now that means something else, right? But what we say has power. What we say can affect our family. So going back to what we said, oh, like these things that I'm doing are not really affecting anyone. I'm not going out and like with a knife and going, but even with just our words, right? Even with things that we write out, things that we say can affect people, right? We think of that now that we have baby cousins, nephews, right? That we want to watch what we're saying with our parents, right? We don't want to speak things that are not causing good, right? And so finishing up with this, right? How Jacob was so a powerful man, right? We'll recognize him always as a powerful man, and he changed. He became a man of change, but his consequences still remained, right? And I was thinking about that this week, like, again, I love writing, so that's what we're saying, like a journal or a paper, right? But if we had a journal, right, which we know that God doesn't even have, because if we ask him to forgive us, like, he forgives us and he forgets it, right? You guys hear that saying, like, forgive but don't forget, that people say, how like, oh, we'll forgive you, but I'm not going to forget what you ever did, like what you did to me. That's not really forgetting, right? forgiving, but Adonai does, and he forgives us, and he forgets about it, right? Does that mean that there's no consequences? My eyes twitching. Does that mean that we don't have consequences? And looking at this, there is, right? A lot of times God doesn't allow those consequences to happen. He gives us grace, and he gives us, right, the love that we need to be transformed and to be changed. But there is consequences. We saw the consequences. A man of God, right? And he, was not perfect, right? He chose a woman that had idols, right? How his genealogy came from a woman that had idols, right? Not perfect. But he knew that, right? He knew that, and he changed. And so what I want to finish with this is saying how our words have power, our actions have power. Edina, how she fell into a sexual sin, right? They have power, and everything that we do has a natural consequence, right? And God tells us, he goes out of his way to tell us that he does not keep like a record of it. So I believe that everything, that things that happen bad to us are a natural consequence, right? If we go out and we steal something, right? Go rob a bank, right? $10,000, let's say. And we go and we pray and we ask God for forgiveness. Yes, he loves us. He forgives us, right? Cops are still looking for you. You're still going to end up in jail. And that doesn't mean because you're in jail that God doesn't love you. It's just a natural consequence, right? And so not abusing God's grace, which now in like contemporary churches is all about grace and the grace period, and saying how like, I can go out the whole week and come back on Shabbat and everything be fine. But seeing how words affected the people that you love the most, right? And that goes even more with our actions. Our actions affect the people that we love, and hopefully that we, as adults, young adults, understand that sooner than later, that everything that we do has a consequence, has an effect, whether good or bad. And so, I think this was finishing up here, just, knowing how to pray. Not, it's so beautiful. I love listening to testimonies, and I feel like we don't do that enough. But really seeing like how God has worked in each of our lives, because I feel like every one of us, we've had things happen in our life, and we've had God transform us, and that's through his grace, right? Through our parents' prayers, through our grandparents' prayers, and it's beautiful to see that. But even though Jacob, wasn't a perfect man, and all of us here are young, we don't have like 40 years that have gone by wasting our life away, but just seeing how our life can be transformed, and so much that we can do in the years that we have, right? What natural consequences come, but God's love still prevailed, right? Through Leah, through this, thing that this person that Jacob didn't want, but through there we have Judah, right? Through there we have Judah, which comes who? Yeshua, right? And so even though, we have consequences, we're not going to say, okay, fine. Like if I think about everything bad that I've done, and God's just going to give me a consequence for it, then like, what's the point, But even through those consequences, we can ask God for the strength to keep going, right? And through that, we can see his love, his forgiveness, but also mostly his love. So that is the final part of that. I wanted to touch base before we finish up and pray about the módulos. I know we were talking a little bit about it. But those, we have 10 different topics, and more than that, because every other one has 2 parts to it. They're not that hard. They were really hard for me to like study it and to really understand what was going on. Mostly about like history, right? The history of how things happened, how things came to effect, the context of the Bible, which Pastor Sebas has also talked about, the importance of that. And I was going to bring the book. It talks about the book of Josephus, which is this very prominent man that was with a lot of philosophers back then. He was born, I think a couple years after Yeshua was born. Anyways, historian, right? And so that's what the whole módulo is about, and it helps you really understand the Bible better in a better context. And so if you guys haven't started it, you can start it literally whenever you want. Like, it's not, if you're too shy to like send it in the chat, then you can just like send it to me. But at the end of the 10th topic, I think the pastores are gonna send you like a certificate to say that you finished. And so I know Christy asked me if she could start, but that's the only one that we have in English that I've done. But you can start with that. Like, you don't have to start with 0 if you don't want to. Yeah. I don't know where Pastor Sebas are. I guess the pastores aren't here either. But maybe he'll be back next week. I don't know. Yeah. We'll finish up in prayer and then we will go. Okay. And pray. Kadosh, thank you for this class that you let us finish. I pray that you speak to the heart, but most importantly to the minds of each of us here, that you help us become more like you, that you help us have a conscience of when we're speaking wrong, of when we're doing wrong, and really understand that everything that we do has a consequence, but that every day, every sunset, every sunrise is a new day for your love and for your grace, and that your mercies are new every single day. I pray that you give us strength to fight the good fight that you've called us to do, to give less of ourselves and more of others, more to others. Excuse me. I hope that you help us apply what we've learned here, and that it's just not one in one ear, not the other, but that you really help us to be changed and transformed throughout this week and the weeks to come. So in Yeshua's name I pray. Amen. Amen.